You're listening to 4CRB's interviews and talkback series.
Well, it's a warm welcome to the microphone to Supreme Court Judge David Ashton Lewis.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad to be back after last week and Anzac Day. You know, we had some breaks, but it's good to be back.
You've been over in Fiji, you've been fishing, you've been enjoying yourself.
I've been lying back, just taking the benefits of being treated, spoiled at the most beautiful five-star resorts. I'm sorry, everyone out there, but there's got to be some perks for being a Supreme Court judge, and that's one of them.
Well, the shame of it is you've been missed over here, and I think you've upset a few people for lying in these wonderful five-star resorts and not actually being on the radio.
To all those I've upset, I heartily apologise and say, but I don't regret it. But it's good to be back, and it's lovely to speak with you, Colin.
Now, we have spoken about a number of things since you got back, and I'll be honest, I was completely confused as to what we were talking about, even though we had a semblance of a topic and a pathway of where we were going. So I'm going to let you hit off, shall we?
All right. Look, something really struck me, and I've watched this ever since, really, October the 7th last year, at the whole one-sided press reporting about, one, the poor Palestinians at the hands of the evil, occupying, almost Nazi-like Israelis, and two, no condemnation of Hamas. So let's step back a bit. In the 1930s, an organisation came to power, and we all spoken about it, the Nazis. The Nazis were quite open and made it clear what their philosophy was. Their philosophy was the master race. The master race were the Germanic people, so Sweden, Norway, Denmark, England, the Anglo-Saxons, and they were the most developed people, and we're not going to apologise for saying that they really should have prominent positions. Their view of race was so perverted that they accepted young German women who were blonde and blue-eyed and everything, and put them with young German men, blonde and blue-eyed, with no marriage. They went to camps, and they were too, and I've seen interviews now with I'm 74, with 80-year-olds who were the produce of those camps, and they were supposedly the future. It didn't have to be marriage, it just had to be the right genes mixing. Well, if the world didn't like it, they didn't say too much, but the Germans accepted it. And then and they had a view that the lesser peoples in Europe, which was Slavs, Gypsies, and Jews, need to be either eradicated, and if they're not eradicated, need to be relegated to being, and the word Untermenschen, undermen. Again, the world seemed to, well, it's none of our business, it's the Germans. Certain voices in the democratic countries said this is disgraceful. Nothing happened, and the Germans started practicing this racial ways. And so then the war comes, and we see them put these things into practice. Now, we spent 6 years, 72 million dead, to say this is unacceptable. We saw what the Nazis and groups called the Einsatzgruppen were in Eastern Europe. They were a division of, like the SS. Their function was one thing: kill the Untermenschen. Now, the Untermenschen were, one, the Jews, and two, the Slavs. Well, the Russians are Slavs. And so we fought and fought and fought. We ultimately won. And then the world ran certain trials called the Nuremberg trials. The Japanese came along doing the same thing in Asia and the Pacific. And the world sort of fought, and thank heavens they did. And what I've realized, we've learnt nothing, because here we are 80 years later with a group called Hamas, which have controlled the Palestinians. Now, I don't buy that the Palestinians were just poor pawns. They were people who were certainly controlled by Hamas from 2009 in the Gaza, but there wasn't too much opposition. Now, why wasn't there opposition? I think for two reasons. If Palestinians, good Palestinians, showed opposition, they were simply killed. Hamas was like the SS. There were the other Palestinians who quietly did agree with it. So the Hamas started saying, from the river to the sea. Now, I think unless you've been asleep over the last few months, on campuses in the West, in university campuses in the US, Canada, Australia, and the United Kingdom, and in France, there have been groups calling for two things. One, the establishment of a Palestinian state. Well, I don't think too many people could disagree with that. They're entitled to have a state that governs themselves, and they were on the start to that in 2009 until this monstrously evil group called Hamas just marched in and said, we're running the place now. And there wasn't any great Palestinian resistance or fighting. They acquiesced and accepted it. So we then have this group, and I'm sure many Palestinians agreed, from the river to the sea. That is a euphemism for the destruction of Israel, and that Palestine controls all the land in the Middle East. Jews, whatever happens to you, we don't care. And so that's been out. Now, what's been the Western press and Western decent people's response to that? Either abject silence or massive support for it. Now, the people I've spoken to who support it, I'm going to be really cruel now, and I hope the listeners will forgive me. They are fools who know nothing about the history of that area, but they listen to 2-minute sound bites and things such as the unlawful Israeli occupation. Well, Israel is not an unlawful occupier. It occupied the lands originally that were set up by the United Nations in 1948. But because Arabs, other Semites, could not accept the existence of Israel, Israel fought a number of wars and expanded to the Golan Heights, to southern Lebanon, and to the West Bank. Why? Because they took those areas to be like buffer states to stop them being attacked by from the river to the sea. Now, the difficulty, there's wrong on both sides, but not to what you would hear these pro-Palestinian groups, Israeli genocide. Well, how can there be Israeli genocide when the 2-odd million Arabs living in Israel have much better lives than you've got Arabs on the Supreme Court of Israel? So all this talk, so now what we have got that Israel is the only party in the wrong here. There's deafening silence about the evil of what Hamas did, crossing the border, killing women, men, children, babies, raping women, dragging them back into Hamas. That the films I won't go into, the films show quite heartbreaking images of these Israeli women, and it's no different to the images that were shown at the Nuremberg war crimes trials of what the Germans did to occupied peoples. But there seems to be a deafening silence and a sympathy that almost amounts to, yes, but Hamas were justified in they were doing. Well, was Nazi Germany justified in saying, Austria, you're a joke, you're German, and you're going to cease to exist? Czechoslovakia, you're a joke, and you're going to cease to exist. And in March 1939, 6 months before the war, the nation of Czechoslovakia ceased to exist. So I'm appalled, and this is all driven by biased, irresponsible reporting that does not report the facts.
Look, what I'd like to do now is take it from a different point of view. And David, we spoke at length off air about history and its purpose and its understanding, and you can see it in the Aboriginal culture. They call it singing stories and so forth. That's their form of history. They're there to teach us lessons. They're there for us to understand the rights and wrongs of what's happened in the past, but they're not there, or they shouldn't be there, for us to carry a debt or carry an anger or a hatred towards what's transpired in the past. You and I, and we've spoken about this before, identify as Anglo-Saxon. In 1066, the Normans steamed across the Channel and decimated the Anglo-Saxons and what were the predecessors to the English people. Are we still upset about it today? Are we still thinking, right, we're going to charge into France and we're going to sort these buggers out?
Yes.
No.
And the French government is going to pay us compensation.
No, we're not. What we're doing is we've realised and we've learnt and we understand. And to me, maybe we should look at it, take it another step. Let's wipe away the past. Let's just put it to the back of our heads for a moment and go, we only are able to deal with what's in front of our face. Someone was angry enough not to speak, but to march across a border, grab a ton of people, commit all sorts of atrocities.
Heinous crimes.
All sorts of atrocities. Take them as hostages. Fire some rockets into the other country and kill people. In the past, they've done other things as well. Do you think that that's not going to provoke a response?
Well, look, it is important to always learn from history. It is important always to declare a wrong, but to not keep carrying it on. So if we apply it here, there is no doubt that from January the 26th, 1788, wrongs were done by the European settlement to Aboriginals. But if you're going to point that out, you need to balance it with the rights that were done, the John Flynns. Again, I repeat again, since 1972, $1,512 billion spent on 881,000 people. Every year in our budget, between $32 and $40 billion.
So let's look at it again. We weren't born or around in those times to be part of those decisions, be part of making those decisions, put our hand up and say we disagree with those decisions. All we've got now is to deal with the decisions that other people made in the past.
Yes.
So that is deal with what's in front of our face. And I think at the end of the day, as much as we could have said, we would have made those decisions differently, or we would have done things differently with our education levels and what we've seen in the past and with the benefit of hindsight, sorry, we're dealing with exactly what's in front of our face today.
I think that's right. And this constant pressure that this political correctness and wokeness has forced upon us, one side must constantly apologise. I had some people speak to me during the week and saying, I am not going to be made to feel like I'm a guest here and allowed to stay here by 881,000 people. I was born here, my parents were born here, my grandparents were born here. And therefore this is my country, this is my land. The fact that I may have white skin and I may have an Anglo-Saxon or Germanic or, in your case, Polish-German name does not make you a Pole. And the fact that I have an Anglo-Saxon Celtic name does not make me an Englishman. I'm an Australian.
And how far do you go back, David? If we really want to look at it, and look at New Zealand's a great example. So the Maori took that island from another culture that got pushed to an island further to the south. They do deny it, although some agree with it. And if we went back a little bit further and a little bit further, we'd get to a point where Neanderthals were around. Is it theirs?
They're not around today, are they?
No, they're not.
So what happened? So, look, everything you're making is right. And while we concentrate, or overly concentrate, on the past and who did wrong to what, we can never move forward.
Correct.
But once we say, look, that did happen in the past, thank God we're not living in that now, we move forward. And one of the difficulties with the Middle East problem is bodies like Hamas and Hezbollah simply will never accept the right of Israel to exist. And Israel is never going to accept being annihilated. And none of them can annihilate Israel. Look, Israel's got nuclear weaponry. Now we know it, they never admit it. And the day Iran does something with nuclear weapons, there's a pretty good chance that it'll be wiped off the face of the map. Now, I think smart Iranians know that. And so we need to move beyond, you have no right to exist. We need to learn from history.
Sure.
Now, history gave Israel legitimacy in 1948 from the United Nations. And if we go back further, we know from history that the Jews and Arabs are Semitic peoples, Semites. And we know that about 1300 BC, a group of Semitic peoples in what is today that Israel, Jerusalem area, believed in a certain religion from a man called Moses. They believed in the God of Abraham. Others didn't, but this group did, and they became the Israelites. Now, when you think of it, the majority, I think it's fair to say, of the anti-Israel Middle Eastern group are Muslims. And again, they're all Semites, certainly Saudi Arabians, Jordanians, Syrians. They're basically Semitic people. You had one group of the Semites who accepted this religion, the God of Abraham. Others didn't. And then if you come forward 1,300 years to 650 AD, a group of those Semitic peoples accepted the writings of Muhammad, the Quran. And all of a sudden, this group are given absolute legitimacy, yet they turn up 600 years after Christianity and 1900 years after the Jews in what is the Jewish people, and they're not a people. Judaism is a religion. It's not a race. And that's all being confused today. And so until we can get some common sense and say, no, there's no from the mountains to the sea, the people who believe in the God of Abraham, that is the Semitic people who follow the Jewish faith, they have a right to be there. And the Semitic people who accept the teachings of the Quran and Islam, they have a right to be there. And then it appears the world has been simply unable to bash their heads together and say, none of you are going to exterminate anyone. You're going to learn to live in peace. Now, we know that works because I'm a Christian. So are you. Yet we know friends here who are atheists, don't believe in any of it, think it's absolute nonsense. Yep. I know friends who, when I was at uni, were socialists, believed in the writings of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels. Well, I think they still do today and think, look, sadly it never worked because it was never done properly. Well, you can say that about anything. Christianity didn't work because it's never been done properly. So we've got to find a way, and I don't know how, to move beyond this, because no one is going to eliminate Israel.
I think one of the things that I have noted is if we want to mire ourselves in the transgressions or the issues of history and what's transpired in the past,
yes,
we're never going to get anywhere. It's going to be, you did this, I did that, you did this. Yeah, okay, these are all statements of fact, absolutely.
And then we've got the problem of modern press, who encourages this thinking.
Until we move forward to the point of today where we get to a point and go, well, what is it you want? You want us to go. Well, we're not going anywhere. What would be the next best solution here? Well, we actually want our own area. Well, we can give you that.
Yep.
We can give you, but again, you're going to have to understand that we're not going anywhere.
And we're going to live in peace with each other, even if we don't agree.
Yes.
You're quite right. We're not going anywhere. You don't have the means to push us out. And if you try, naturally, we will defend ourselves. And so now we have this disgraceful one-sided press playing up the Palestinians, not so much en masse, but it's quietly there. Oh, they didn't do that wrong. The Jews brought it upon themselves. Yeah, just like the Jews brought the Holocaust upon themselves.
And again, another one of the things that I find myself disappointed in the TV broadcasts, and we hear the same old rubbish that we get out of the media, where they're trying to find a crack and pour themselves into it and cause contentious issues.
Yes.
We as Australians, not knowing the ins and outs and the minutiae of what's going on over there, should be just making the statement that our hopes and our prayers, or our thoughts and our prayers, are with you, and that sanity will prevail.
Well,
because sure, if you ask us to come over there and have a chat to you and try and mediate, we'll help.
Our position should be Palestinians, you, one, have a right to exist. Two, you have a right to your own state. And it's up to the world to carve out.
Just as
the
Jewish people need
the
that.
Jewish people have a right to their state,
Yes.
and that was carved out in 1948. The only reason why the Jewish people have expanded was to stop, to give them a buffer.
Yes.
Now, I would say to Israel, withdraw from the West Bank, because you took that after the Six-Day War. You've been gradually settling it, and so the original two-state solution was Palestine would be the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Now, I don't find a problem with that, but to make it clear, but that will not be a base for you to be constantly killing Jews.
Yes.
That'll be...
And that was the problem. That is why they took that parcel of land in the Six-Day War.
It was why they took the Golan Heights. The Golan Heights legitimately belonged to Syria. They took the Golan Heights in 1967 because they are mountains that look down into the Israeli valley and their kibbutz. And what were the Syrians doing up until the Six-Day War? Putting artillery there and just lobbing shells, killing people in kibbutz. Now, if you could say, well, you're not going to do that. And if you could enforce that, I'd say to the Israelis, then give that land back to Syria.
And that's the point.
But you can understand the Israelis saying, we don't trust them. They've been trying since 1967, Yasser Arafat, Yitzhak Rabin, the Oslo Accords, 1993, the two-state solution never got off the ground.
Since the 80s, when I became aware of what was going on out there in the world, there were bombs going off, killing students. There was Yasser Arafat, who hijacked aircraft and landed them in the desert. There were all sorts of things to provoke the other side into.
And what does it all stem from? It all stems from the inability of the Arab Semitic peoples to accept the existence of the State of Israel. And I don't ever see enough emphasis, but these are your people. They just have a different religion. And the United Nations set them up. So please move to the point, whether you hate them or whatever, we accept it. And it's not helped by biased press reporting.
All right, David, we're getting towards the end of the show. Time for you to sum up.
Well, I'm just saddened by watching since October the 7th, 98% of press reporting is on the poverty of the Palestinians, nothing wrong with that, and quiet on the atrocities that match the Germans in the Second World War in Russia, Eastern Europe, but there's silence on that, seemingly an acquiescence in it, and how all wrong exists on the Israeli side. And the Israelis, I've heard this, bought October the 7th upon themselves. That is disgraceful nonsense. They bought none of that upon themselves. But again, so it's getting to fair reporting, and we can see these people are unable to fix it themselves. And the trouble with world politics, you've got one group, when we had the Soviet Union, they supported the Arabs, and the West supported the Jews. And there's got to be some way to say, we in the outside world, we accept that both peoples have a right to exist. And if you can't do it, we will step in and protect Israel from you, and we will protect Palestine from those who would take it over and use it as a launching pad, Mr. Hamas, Mr. Hezbollah.
David Ashton-Lewis, thank you very much for your time.
Oh, as always, thank you. Good to be back.
You've been listening to 4CRB's interviews and talkback series. Support local online content and become a financial supporter today at 4CRB.com.